So I'm going to talk about Quil, which is an experimental system for online music notation handwriting recognition. So if anyone wants to follow along in these slides, they are at slides.iquil.com. A little about me: I like beautiful things, and I like to make things. So I like to make beautiful things. I like solving problems using my intuition, and I have been mistakenly called an engineer. I've been mistaken for a mathematician. And there's something about this little piece of paper we're getting in a few weeks that says something about mastering science. But really, I'm a musician, I'm a composer, and I'm interested in how technology can help us solve human problems. A musician friend of mine recently, while we were having an argument about the use of drum samples in rock and roll, called me Mr. Luddite, and I took this as a compliment. What is this thing? This is a system that is an attempt to develop a transparent user interface, not unlike pencil and paper. It is best suited for gestural interfaces, which we'll see in a minute, that use a stylus or a finger for input, but it can be used with a mouse and a trackpad. Later on, I'll be encouraging you to try this out on your own devices if you have them. I actually have a spare tablet up here if anyone wants to borrow it. The user can enter music notation with their existing knowledge of conventional Western music notation, CWMN. This is going to come up a couple times later in the talk. By that we mean this very standardized system of conventional Western music notation. And it is working to our advantage today because we have Sam here who's going to demonstrate some examples for us in a minute. And I'd never met Sam before an hour and a half ago. The guy that he's replacing backed out a few hours ago. But this is, the silver lining here is that we have this very rich way to communicate music, and I can rely on Sam because he's trained to have knowledge, and we both have this similar knowledge in our heads. So it's a very effective and efficient way to communicate music. So the idea is that this system will take advantage of that knowledge that a user has already without having to learn some new system or some new set of symbols. So why are we doing this? A music notation user interface should allow the user to sketch music quickly enough before they forget. This is a problem that I have all the time. My memory is terrible. I want to get stuff out there without spending a lot of time before I forget it. So the tools should not get in the way or force you to think in a certain way. And a lot of the existing, I won't get too much into the details of the existing commonly available music notation software, but generally these tools do get in the way of the way you work and the way you think. Most importantly, they shouldn't force you to make any decision prematurely just for the sake of the technical implementation or for the tool's sake. So here's a very long rundown of the current state of music notation handwriting recognition. It hasn't been that much work done. Most of it is sort of on the more gestural side of things, which means what's a little bit different about that is that you have to learn a specialized set of symbols that you will draw that are not necessarily close to the conventional Western music notation symbols. Some work has been done by Susan E. George at the University of South Australia, and in the mid-90s there was some work done at IBM's T.J. Watson Research Center. Most of the work that has been done in music recognition has been done in offline, meaning things that are recognized from a piece of paper that has been printed long ago, not necessarily being created in the flesh. And that's really what we mean by online. This system that I developed is online in the sense that it's on the internet. But really when we say online in the recognition world, we mean online as in real time. Somebody's actually in the flesh drawing, rather than recognizing something that has been drawn or printed or typeset on a piece of paper. There are also several commercially available offline OMR programs that work with typeset music notation, and there's some research work that's been done for offline recognition of handwritten music notation. So the real question is, how do I get from this, which is something I sketched. This is a sketch for Bridal March that I wrote for my wife. We got married last summer. So this is a mess. You can see this is basically yada, 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 says, need more time, there's sort of this big gap. Well, I think all these things that are crossed out. So how do we get from that to this typeset version? And this is something that is designed to be read by, yeah, you can actually read that now, which is why you get the joke, right? It said the same thing on the other page, but it's this mess that no one else in the world can read. So the idea is, this is something that is designed for somebody like Sam here or some other musician to actually read. And we want to shorten the path between this sketch and the finished product. So let's take a look. Let's see how this thing works. Maybe we'll get this whiteboard working, maybe not. Please give this a try. You can point your, so this is, there are many things that are still wrong with this. Things will probably not work for you. It's trained on my hand, so it'll work well for me. I'm going to show you a couple of prototypes, and then I'll encourage you to try it out on your own. So, this is an early iPhone prototype that works with discrete continuous symbols. Everyone see that okay? A little.
Zoom in a little bit with the toggle.
Is that better? A little bit better? So hopefully the iPad will work a little bit better. But anyway, I just drew a treble clef and misrecognized it. Try that again. Yeah, so that's a treble clef it recognized. You can see a little bit better on the back screen there. That seems to be working okay. So we've drawn these discrete continuous symbols, or so we just drew them in one stroke. So the next thing is, okay, how do we get those things? How do we put those things together? I'll show you a little demo on the iPad here. This is the present. Does that look? So this is the present implementation. So I'll draw a few things here, and the iPad is a little on the slow side, but if we wait long enough, hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll start recognizing stuff. I think the wheels are turning, so we'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to try a couple of things. So it's possible that all of the props that I've used, all of them will fail entirely. It's always a possibility. You can see the calibration here is way off because we couldn't recalibrate it, but I'll sort of pretend to try and draw something here. So we got a treble clef, try a sharp sign, and a full note. This is okay because we can blame it all on the calibration, right? So anyway, we can move symbols around after they've been recognized. We can hide. Didn't need to do that. So back here, didn't need to do that. This is a complete disaster. There we go. Don't touch that thing again. So if we want to, we can say, okay, hey system, I didn't really mean that. I meant this other thing over here, and we can say I really meant sharp, right? So this is actually going to allow the user to inform the classifier and say, hey, this is what I really meant. So let's try and actually get a note out of this thing. Yay! All right, so move these down a little bit. So Sam. So I'm gonna. Oh, man, didn't mean to do that again. Don't do that again, please. How do we get back here? I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'll use the laptop because I know how to do that. So Sam, I'm going to ask you to play that. So here we go. We have playback built into the system also. So as you can see, what I've done here on the laptop, I can hide the recognized layer, or I can hide the ink layer, and I can hide the recognized layer also. I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'll draw a couple more things on the trackpad, which will also work. So how's the iPad doing here? Let's try the iPad again. So there we go. So we have something on the iPad working now. Let's try an example here. So you can see we can segment, if we're lucky. Probably turn for a little bit, maybe it'll come back this time. Try something else here. So I totally didn't mean to do that, so I can say, hey, I didn't mean that. I wanted to delete that. So there we go, we got a half note. Let's move that down. How about playing the whole thing, Sam? Yeah, so this man is trained in the ways of this stuff and knows what to do. So the other thing we can do is we can resize, and if we want to differentiate the ink color, we can also change the color of the ink. Say we wanted red ink, we can sort of see that. So this has the advantage that we can stay in this unrecognized world if we want to. If I want to draw something that we don't think the system is ever going to understand, we can sort of use that as a crutch. So let's try this one more time. We might be in some bad state with the iPad, but we got a couple of symbols, so that's better than nothing. So I encourage you to try this out. And the reason that I've put the demo at this point is that I would be very pleased if you were to, let's see, if you were to ignore me for the rest of the talk and try this thing out. So give it a try, iQuil.com. At the conclusion, Sam will play a couple of audience volunteered submissions if anyone's willing to do it. So there is a fine line between student and clerk in a couple of different ways. So how does this thing work? First of all, we have segmentation. That's the piece that takes the ink strokes and it chops them up and says, hey, these things make up this symbol. The classification, which is which strokes are likely to be a particular symbol, and then the language model, which is how all the pieces fit together. So, for instance, if we were to draw these 4 strokes, if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or these 5 strokes rather, we would say, okay, the first one we think is a treble clef, and these next 4 we think combine to form this sharp, rather than just this haystack of strokes. So the next thing we do is we classify. We want to say, okay, we think that these strokes belong, are more likely to be this particular symbol. And I should point out that we're always classifying on trained ink. And these are all trained on my hand. The training application looks like this. We'll get a symbol, and we'll say, hey, that's what I mean by bass clef. That's what I mean by treble clef. You can see the ink looks very different than what one of these typeset symbols look. I'm not going to sit there and sort of fill in all this stuff and make these fat lines and things. So it's important to know that these are all trained on my hand, and it's a really simple representation.